Hello and welcome to today's Admin Chat. Happy Friday, although it might not be Friday the day that you're actually watching this. I'm Carol Schulte, founder of Living Big, and I'm a speaker trainer and have a new program called Get Your Brave On because I'm all about helping people like you maximize their influence and their impact in their organizations. And communication is a big part of that. So I am super thrilled to be talking to you today on how to communicate your way to the top. Effective communication strategies for administrative professionals and executive secretaries such as yourself. Now, we are going to spend the next 20 to 30 minutes together, and we have a lot to cover. So I encourage you to get rid of any distractions that may be in front of you, shut down all other windows, turn down the radio, and grab your notebook or your journal because you are going to want to take some notes today. All right, let's get started. Now, if I were to say to you, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your communication, would you agree? Perhaps a bit of a bold statement, and yet it is so true. It really is at the heart of all we do. And even when we're not using our words, don't kid yourself, you are still very much communicating. And, well, it's very, very important to look at. Why does it matter? Well, it matters because effective communication is no longer a beneficial skill. It is an essential one. And it really is the key to building greater relationships, commanding greater respect, and making a greater impact, both in your workplace and outside of work as well. And it's the access point to achieving even more in both your career and in your life. So today we're going to look at communication with respect to how you show up, how you speak up, and how you make things happen. We're going to look at some concepts and some techniques, and you are going to walk away with real tools that you're going to be able to implement in your work and in your life right away. So let's start. How are you showing up? How are you showing up? And have you actually given proper time to think about this? Because I bet you are making more of an impact than you realize just as you show up, how you show up before you even open your mouth. And the truth is that perception is reality, even though it isn't. Now, I learned this lesson a long time ago, in a bit of a hard way. My dad used to say this phrase all the time, perception is reality. And I didn't really believe him. In fact, I always wanted to argue with him. But it kind of is the truth. Just like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so is perception. And even though we may think we're coming across a certain way, it may not actually be how we are coming across a certain way because it's up to the reality of the person who is perceiving us. And so we have to make sure that we are doing all that we can to present and project who we actually want to be so that we can really maximize the opportunity for us to be interpreted and perceived the way that we intend. So there are 7 tools and techniques that we're going to use to make sure that we can maximize that opportunity and take some control in terms of how we're being perceived by others. The first technique, be the first. What do I mean by that? Be the first to say hello, to greet someone. Be the first to offer your hand and do a handshake. Volunteer to do something above and beyond in your workplace. Be the first to share a little bit more about yourself, self-disclose, ask how somebody is. Be the first to stand out, and no doubt it will have a positive ripple effect on those around you. You'll get noticed. You will. The second, be intentional. Now, I can only imagine the gazillion things that are on your to-do list each and every day. And you may not have a whole lot of time to actually think and set intentions behind all of your actions and your to-dos. But when you can, it is so worth it. Now, I tend to travel a lot for my work, and I love flying. But the more I fly, the less comfortable I get, or the more comfortable I get with it, and the less time I leave before getting to the airport, making sure I have more than enough time to make my flight. And this one particular time, I was kind of get just a little bit close. And unfortunately, the personal kiosk was not working, so I had to wait in that long check-in assistance line. And by the time I got to the front, well, it may have been 59 minutes and the cutoff is 1 hour. So I got to the front and put on a little smile and I said, "Hi, I know it's my responsibility and I'm cutting it just a little close to make my flight, but I'm really hoping you can help me out here because it's really important I get on this flight. I have a connecting flight and I'm going to speak at a conference, and anything you can do, really, I just need to make sure that I get on this flight. And she looked at me and she looked at her watch and she said, sorry, cutoff time is 60 minutes. The flight's closed. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. There's got to be something that you can do. Please help me. You don't understand. I've got a connection flight. I really need to get on this flight. I've got an important conference that I have to speak at. And all she did was nudge her head towards who I'm assuming was her supervisor. So I took a little step to the left and I said, hi, I know it's my responsibility to make sure that I'm here with plenty of time. And unfortunately, the kiosk was closed and I waited in line and it was a really, really long line. And I know that I'm just under the cutoff time, but I really need to get on this flight. Gave my whole spiel again. I've got an important conference to get to and I've got to connect to me. Please do whatever you can. Please, please, please. I really need to get on this flight. And he looked at me and he looked at his watch and he said, sorry, cut off with 60 minutes. And I thought, I need to change my tactic here and fast. So I said, listen, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? And he said, all right, go to aisle 6. If there's anybody that can help you out, that's going to be the one to be able to do it. Now, I can't guarantee they get on this flight, but if you don't make this flight, they'll at least be able to reroute you and make sure that you get your connection. And I said, thank you very much. Tried to keep on my smile. And then I busted and moved to aisle 6. Of course, another long lineup. The older woman must have taken pity on me who was at the front of the line because she said, would you like to go in front of me? And I said, yes, please. So I stood at the front of the line and I took a moment to get intentional with what I was going to make sure I achieved in that conversation, because all that it was, the only thing between me and making the flight or not was this woman behind her desk. And so I knew that I needed to make that impact and be intentional with what I was trying to do. And so I said, okay, I'm going into this conversation, acknowledging her position, because I can only imagine how tough her work is, dealing with lots of people upset and frustrated and yelling and screaming. But I am going to make sure I get on this flight or another one that will ensure that I get my connection. So all of a sudden, the one she was dealing with walks away, and without even looking up from her desk, she said, next. So I walk up, take a deep breath, drop my shoulders, and I noticed that her name tag said Angelita. And I said, Angelita, hi. Before we even begin, I just want to acknowledge you for all of the hard work that you do. I can't imagine it's an easy position. You've got people yelling and screaming at you all the time. But if there's anything that you may be able to help me with today, please know that I really, really appreciate it. And if not, then I still appreciate who you are and what you do. Well, she looked up from her desk. She pushed her glasses a little bit up on her nose and she said, well, I don't know what the issue is here, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to figure something out. And I said, thank you so much. And within a few seconds, Angelita was on her computer, tapping, and on the phone, on her walkie-talkie, figuring it out, making sure that I did get on that flight. I was escorted through security. I went all the way to the gate. And on top of that, I was upgraded to more legroom. So there you have it. Now, would that have happened if I didn't take a moment to get intentional and try and put myself in her shoes? Maybe, maybe not. But it certainly would not have been as enjoyable. And chances are I wouldn't have been upgraded to additional legroom. So try and be intentional in terms of how you're showing up, how you are looking to other people, and try and put yourself in their shoes as well. Think about what it is that you want to achieve in your communication. The third, be curious. Who remembers their first date? I bet you are so curious about learning more about the other person, asking questions, really listening, eager, engaged, and chances are you want it to be interesting too. So how can we be more curious in our conversations, in our interactions with those that we work with and those in our life too? Be professional. Make sure that who you are here is who you are everywhere. Because if you're somebody who's going to choose to engage in gossip by the coffee machine, chances are people may change their view of you. So make sure that you are who you are all the time, at your desk, at the coffee station, in your car when you might be honking or have some road rage. So see if you can maintain that professionalism in all areas of your life and under all circumstances. Be generous. Be generous with your sharing. Be generous with your time. Be generous with asking about other people. Be generous with wanting to share an ear or a lending hand, because again, that really does go far. People notice. So the more generous you are, the more of an impact you're going to make. And then be unflappable. What does it mean to be unflappable? It means regardless of the chaos that may exist around you or in your life, and chances are you deal with that a lot as an executive secretary or administrative assistant or a professional, how can you be unflappable? How can you not be affected by the craziness that may be around you? Keep your cool, stay grounded, stay present, because that also goes a long way in how you communicate who you are and how you're perceived by others. And then finally, be yourself. You are only going to be the best in the world at being yourself. And if you're constantly trying to be something that you're not only are you going to get this icky feeling yourself, but people aren't going to know who you are. They're not going to be able to relate to you. And chances are they're not going to want to spend time with you or get to know you more. So be yourself. If you're that person that loves sending comics around the office, or you have a collection of crazy cat photos, share that. The more that you share of you, the more you give permission for others to share more of themselves. So thinking of these 7 strategies, how are you going to show up moving forward? What is just one idea that you can put into practice starting today? Give me a second to think about that. Okay, and now how are you speaking up? Obviously, our words and our communication does have a huge role to play. Now, there's a spectrum of communication. There are those who are very passive and don't share what they're truly feeling. They don't necessarily pipe up or raise their hand, share their idea. And then on the other side, there are those that are aggressive. And sometimes, unfortunately, the word aggressive has a synonym that's not very nice, especially when it comes to women in the workplace as well. So we don't necessarily want to speak out of turn or speak when not asked and always be the one to share. I'm sure you've had meetings or you've worked with people who just have too much to say all the time. But there is a sweet spot in the middle somewhere, and that is being assertive. And being assertive really just means that you have a voice. You have the power to share your ideas that will have an influence and make an impact. So how can we play more in that sweet spot of being assertive, where you're not afraid to speak up? Not necessarily all the time, 100% of the time, but to know that your words and your ideas matter. Sometimes we need to gain a little bit of confidence when it comes to speaking up. So sometimes we need to strike what's called a power pose. Now, Amy Cuddy has done an amazing amount of research on this idea that when we can physically take on a powerful pose, it actually affects mentally how we think about ourselves and how we perform. So she did lots of studies where she was looking at how people performed in interviews. And before going into the interview, she asked them to take on what's called a power pose and hold it for 2 minutes. And those that did this far outperformed those that did not. So a power pose is either exactly as you see here, Wonder Woman or Superman, where you have your hands on your hips, your feet nice and wide, shoulders back, chest out, where you're physically taking up space. A few other options is where you have your hands up, like scaring away a bear or something, but again, physically taking up space. And if you can hang on to one of these power poses for even under 2 minutes, 90 seconds to 2 minutes, it will have an impact on the confidence that you feel, how you go into a meeting, or how you perform in an interview or a presentation. So strike a power pose the next time you need to pump yourself up a little bit before you have something important that you're going to deliver. We also need to look at the power of how messages are being interpreted. Now, Albert Moravian did an amazing study that looked at how specific words were being interpreted. And what he found out was that the word themselves didn't necessarily have as much of an impact as how the words were being said and the overall body language that we were using when we were actually sharing or saying these words. So the actual word, only accounted for 7% of how the message was being interpreted. The vocals, our tone, the pace, the tonality, equated for 38% of how messages were being interpreted. And the visual, the whole body language, if we were open or closed, if we were making eye contact, equated for 55%. Now, unfortunately, the study is sometimes taken out of context because he was looking only specifically at how emotive words were being interpreted. So sometimes the study is taken out of context, but really what's important to note here is that the words themselves do not have as much power as we sometimes think they do. And we spend so long working on our scripts and the specific words, and we want to get it all perfect, instead of thinking that actually how we express and what we look like, the body language we're taking on as we do so, also play a very, very important role. So think about that. Consider how you're going to be perceived through your body and through the tone of your words, as well as the words themselves. We also want to consider what's called the communication funnel. And these days, there are so many different ways that we can be inundated with messages. We have face-to-face, then we have video, we have phone, and then we have emails and text and all these different platforms that people can send messages to. But there is a funnel. And if we really want to maximize the potential for our message to be interpreted as intended, then we want to make sure we stay as top of the funnel as possible. So the top would be face-to-face communication. Now, unfortunately, you and I don't have face-to-face in person, but we have the next best thing, video, because you're still able to see a lot of my body language and hear the tones of my words and my messages. So it's the next best thing. So if you have an important message to convey, ideally you want to do that live, face-to-face. So you really share and hold space with someone and they have the entire body to be able to take in the message. Next best thing, video. After that, phone. Now, unfortunately, you don't get any visuals with phone, but you can still hear the tone of the words being used as well as interpret it through the words themselves. After phone is email. After email is text. Now, as we get further down the funnel, sometimes we don't even use complete sentences. So, of course, we are maximizing the potential and room for misinterpretation and miscommunication. So the lower we get down the funnel, the greater that chance. So again, if you have an important message or conversation to have, make sure you are staying at as high as you can on the communication funnel. And finally, with respect to words, we have to be careful with some of the words to avoid. Now, when we use phrases like "I just," we belittle anything that comes after that. So take ownership. When you have an opinion, when you have an idea, don't "I just" anything. If you just want to grab somebody's attention, you just want somebody's attention for a few minutes, get rid of the "just." I would like to speak with you about something, or the report needs to be in by this time, not "I just was wondering and hoping and wishing and praying that maybe you could have a few minutes for me." No, you matter. So make sure that you show that through your words. Another phrase we should avoid or use very little or more than we do often is "I'm sorry." Now, as a Canadian, we overuse this phrase so much. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." People will bump into us on the tube or the streetcar, and we apologize for that. So sometimes we use "I'm sorry" as a filler word. So be careful. Be careful. Are you really sorry, or are you using it as a filler word? And if it is something that you're sorry for, a more powerful phrase would be "I apologize." It's showing more ownership. And then finally, I think. There are a lot of people who think a lot of things. But every time we use the word "I think," then we're making it more opinion and less fact. When in fact, everything is opinion if you think about it. So we don't need to say, "I think that maybe it would be better perhaps if maybe," just state what it is that you want to say, and you will command greater respect in that fashion. So thinking about how you're currently speaking up, how are you going to speak up? Using some of these tools and techniques that we've just learned, the power pose, or the spectrum of communication, or considering the communication funnel, one of those phrases to avoid. How are you going to speak up more powerfully? And what is one idea that you can put into practice, again, starting today? Or if not today, tomorrow, depending what time you're watching this. And then finally, how are you making things happen? How are you actually getting into action? Because this is where we're going to have the opportunity to have the greatest influence and the greatest impact. You are here for a reason. And although you don't often get enough credit for all the work that you do, I mean, executive secretaries and administrative professionals are often the forefront, the face of the entire brand and organization. And you have the opportunity to make a big impact. So how can you make that impact? Well, by making sure that you are using the words that matter, but also making things happen, having the influence that you want to have. One of the biggest things that you can do is recognize that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Sometimes we get so consumed with all the work that we have to do that we forget that no matter what business we're in, we're always in the people business. And if you want to have a greater influence and impact, then you need to show the people that you work with that you care. You need to get to know them. You need to be curious, ask them questions, be on their side, cheerlead them, support them. And when you do that on a regular basis, that when you need something or when you have a favor, when you have an initiative that you want people to back you up on, then they'll be there. You'll have their buy-in. They'll be on your side because they already know that you care. It's a great way to increase trust and respect in the workplace. So if you do want to increase your impact and influence, then really consider this phrase. At the end of the day, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And there are small ways, small things that you can do that will make a big difference. And another way that we can do this is through feedback and acknowledgement. Now, Marshall Goldsmith talks about a culture that welcomes feedback and welcomes what he calls feed forward. Now, I don't know what it's like in your organization and what culture you have in terms of being able to share ideas, being able to potentially give tips or suggestions or help people out with ideas, and to share also how things are being interpreted and how you perceive certain people in certain situations. Now, I think it's very, very important to create cultures where you're regularly acknowledging, praising, and giving feedback. Now, sometimes when we hear the word feedback, we cringe and we think it's all negative. It doesn't have to be that way. Feedback can be positive and not so positive. And instead of looking at it as being negative, reframe it as an area of opportunity, room for improvement. If somebody is taking the time to give you feedback, whatever it is, it means they care. They care about you and they care about your development and your learning. And the more open all of us, top down, bottom up, sideways, within an organization can give feedback, the better we're all going to be because we can be our most efficient, most effective selves. So I think it's important to look at praise, acknowledgement, feedback recognition, but also this idea of feed forward speaks to the fact that we can also have an impact on how we behave moving forward. Often we're looking at all the behaviors and things that have happened in the past that may not have been so great. But we have an opportunity to change that moving forward. So who are we going to commit to being moving forward? What are some behaviors that we want to take on? How can we help other people be more accountable? And how can we have others be accountable for us and what we are committed to doing in the future? So it's not just about looking back about things that we did not so well, but it's about how we can step forward, move forward more powerfully together and create a culture of feedback and feed forward. So thinking about these ideas, how are you going to make things happen with respect to the influence and the impact that you want to have in your workplace? Now, we have covered a lot of ground today. So I invite you to think about how you show up, how you speak up, and how you make things happen, and really do commit to 2 or 3 actions and how you can implement this learning starting today. Remember, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your communication. Perhaps a bit of a bold statement, and yet it is true. And as Jim Rohn says, if you just communicate, you can get by. But if you communicate skillfully, you can work miracles. And I hope after today's presentations, you will have a few useful and additional valuable nuggets that you can recognize is going to help you communicate more effectively, more skillfully, and work some miracles in your workplace. Thank you so much for your participation today, and I really do want to stay connected. If you have some questions for me, if you want to go deeper into a topic, then feel free to reach out. I love hearing from you, and I look forward to staying connected with you and hopefully seeing some of you at Executive Secretary Live coming up. Until then, have a fabulous day. I'm Carol Schulte, and remember, speak up, stand out, and have the influence and the impact that you want to have today. We'll see you soon.